Hey guys, what's going on? And welcome back to another Knights of the Old Republic combat guide. I saw a few people found some value in my combat mechanics guide, so I wanted to go and make one for how damage works as well. And, you know, it's something that I never really had a great understanding until I started trying to learn more about how the D20 system works. And, you know, maybe you're in the same boat. So I wanted to put this together. Hopefully it works. I'll put timestamps as before in the description below so you can skip to the parts that you find most interesting. So, you know, you don't waste your time listening to the whole thing if you don't want to listen to it. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and hop into it. But thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoy this. The first thing I want to talk about is how is damage calculated. Now, I say this is the first thing I want to talk about. This is actually kind of a complex subject, I think. You may think it's a lot easier than I do. Before I get into this, I would recommend, if you haven't checked out my combat mechanics video, I'll put a link in the description and I'll put a card in the top right corner of your screen. I would definitely encourage you to go check that out. I think it's a good prerequisite video to this. It talks about how you land attacks and kind of the calculations that go into that. Once you've watched that, I think this one will make a little bit more sense. So the way damage is calculated, I'm going to use melee weapons as an example with strength as the governing attribute. Blasters work the same way with your dexterity. So the way it works is, once again, it's based on the roll of dice, just like your attack attributes. So if you take a longsword, for example, I'm showing it here, it deals 1 to 12 damage is what it says. So what that means is it is going to be your attribute bonus, so your strength attribute bonus, plus the roll of a 12-sided die. So suppose I have a 12 in my strength stat, that means I'm going to get a +1 attribute bonus. I'll roll the 12-sided die, and so say I get a 4. My damage output to my target would be 5. 4 from the roll, 1 from the attribute bonus. At a high level, hopefully that kind of makes sense. Now, it can get a little bit more complicated. So for example, let me show you now this double-bladed sword that I have. Now that one, the damage says 2 to 12. Now let's compare that. Let's compare the 1 to 12 on the longsword versus the 2 to 12 of the double-bladed sword. We're not taking into account, you know, hitting twice. We're just assuming we're hitting once. Let's not worry about the other. What's the advantage of having a 2 to 12 versus a 1 to 12? On, you know, a surface level, you might think, well, it doesn't really make that big of a difference, you know. I have a little bit better chance to score higher. I'm not going to score a 1, but is that it? Not quite. Although a longsword inflicts less damage than, like, say, the double-bladed sword, it's equally likely to roll a 1, a 7, or a 12 with a longsword. Right, it's always going to be a 1 out of 12. However, your double-bladed sword is far less likely to roll a 2 or a 12. Right, so you're far less likely to deal the minimum amount of damage, and you're far less likely to deal the maximum amount of damage, right? Because you'd have a 1 in 36 chance of hitting those. You'd have to roll snake eyes, or you'd have to roll boxcars, right? You'd have to get 2 12s, or 2 6s, or 2 1s. However, you have a far more likely chance of rolling, like, say, a 7, a 1 in 6 chance. So your longsword may have an equal chance of scoring anywhere in your range, but when you start rolling more die, you have a higher likelihood to hit somewhere in the middle. So the more die that you're rolling, which is usually indicated by that first number, again, we'll talk a little bit about how that might change. That's going to give you the chance to at least get a higher number. So you'll have a better chance to get a higher number, but perhaps a smaller chance to get the maximum number, if that makes sense. Now take, for example, a weapon like this Vulker stun stick that I have here. This one, the damage says from 2 to 5. Now, what exactly does that mean? What it does not mean is 2 rolls of a 5-sided die, because there's no such thing as a 5-sided die. What that actually means is it's going to be 1 roll of a 4-sided die plus a damage bonus of 1. So you're going to get 1 free damage plus whatever the roll is of your 4-sided die. So that's kind of how those weird ones work. So if you see anything like parity-wise that's odd, like number-wise, like if you had a 7 or a 15 or something that's not a normal die, then it's probably going to be 1 or 2 rolls of a normal sided die plus, you know, some sort of a damage bonus. Now that we've talked about basic damage mechanics, let's move on to a more advanced example. Now this may seem a little bit more convoluted. However, whereas in the beginning of the game, you know, your damage calculation is going to be your strength modifier plus your dice roll. End of story. Once you get towards the end of the game, you start adding weapon modifiers on, like, you know, your crystals and stuff like that on your lightsaber. You add more feats. this is going to be a very realistic damage calculation that you might see. So let's understand this. The example that they give us is a critical hit. Not going to talk about that. We're just going to talk about a regular hit. If you want to understand how critical hits work, go watch the combat mechanics video. But a normal hit from a dark side scoundrel Jedi Guardian using Master Force Jump, a sneak attack with a lightsaber. It has a sigil crystal, an Opila crystal, a strength modifier of +8, weapon specialization lightsaber feat, and dark side mastery. Holy cow. Like I said, that's a lot, but that is actually a very realistic example. Now, what it tells us, with all of that, our damage output is going to be somewhere between 25 and 71. That does not mean, obviously, that we are going to roll a 71-sided die 25 times. What you have to do is break that up into smaller pieces that form that damage range. So from the lightsaber, we're going to have a damage range of 2 to 16. That means we are going to roll 2 8-sided dice. We're going to get a free 3 damage from one of our crystals. We're going to get a damage range of 1 to 6th from the sigil crystal. That means we will roll 1 6-sided die. We will get a free 8 damage from the strength modifier, and a free 4 damage from the force jump, a free 2 damage from the weapon specialization feat. Then we will get a 1 to 8 roll from dark side mastery, so that means we will roll 1 8-sided die. And then sneak attack 4 is going to give us a damage range of 4 to 24. That means we are going to roll 4 6-sided dice. So take a 6-sided die, roll it 4 times, add those together. That's going to be your sneak attack bonus. So that is what's going to give us our damage range of 25 to 71. Each one of those individual rolls, and then add them all together. So hopefully that makes a little bit more sense when you see your damage range. It's not some weird dice rolls. It is a bunch of smaller dice rolls, and then we just add them all together. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, so now that we've talked about damage and how damage is dealt, let's talk about receiving damage and counteracting damage by the means of damage resistance. Now, one thing, at least from my research and what I've learned, it's kind of a misnomer. In Knights of the Old Republic, they call it damage resistance. However, it seems in the D&D world, it's called damage reduction, actually. Damage resistance in the actual D&D, other D20 games. Damage resistance halves the amount of damage that you take from a certain source. That's not what they mean in Knights of the Old Republic. It actually is damage reduction. Now, damage reduction is actually a very powerful mechanic in the D20 world. And I'm going to leave a link in the description to a nice website that kind of explains just the raw impact of how damage reduction works. But basically, take, for example, Brejik's armband and Brejik's belt. Now, Brejik's, one of the armband resists slashing damage by 5, and the other one resists bludgeoning damage by 5. I don't remember which one is which. I'll show them both on the screen. What that means is you're just going to ignore 5 points of damage. So take, for instance, watch this clip I'm showing right here. Okay, are you watching? Now we have Sith troopers attacking and a Sith technician. Notice that only one of them is dealing damage, and that's the technician. The other 3 are all using Volker stun sticks, and they're dealing me no damage. Why is that? I have this recording going on for a very long time. The reason is, if you look kind of in the code of the game, Sith troopers have a 10 strength, which means that they get no strength attribute bonus. So when they're dealing damage, they're doing strictly the roll of the die. That's all the damage that they're doing. Now, as we talked earlier, the Volker stun stick deals 2 to 5 damage, which means the maximum amount of damage they're possibly going to be able to do is 5. Well, it just so happens that I'm wearing Brejik's belt and Brejik's armband. I'm not wearing any armor, nothing else to protect me. Just those 2 things. They can't deal any more than 5 damage. They will never cause me any damage. I could let this go on a loop for the rest of my day, and they will never cause me any damage. And that is actually a really powerful feature to have. So I'm actually just going to read a few of these things on just what the value of damage reduction is. So at -1 damage reduction, you have negated the raw damage of unarmed strikes. So anyone without a strength bonus, so for example, if one of these Sith troopers were to attack me with his fists at level 10 strength, they're not going to deal me any damage. I'm immune. All right. Now, -2, -3 damage reduction, we're just going to be resisting damage. So if they dealt us, say 4 damage, we're only going to take 1. Now let's look at -4. Now you are eliminating the maximum raw damage of any 1 to 4 weapon. We don't do spells, but attacks. This includes daggers, the lowest level martial arts, etc., etc. You know, D&D rules. But any 1 to 4 damage weapon, such as the Bothan Stun Stick, would not hurt us. That one actually would because it deals the extra 1 damage bonus, but you understand what I mean. At a -5 damage reduction, you are canceling out the highest possibility ability modifier from an opposing player character. So any damage you receive will be the raw die roll. That's alluding to any sort of strength attributes. So that's D20 rules, but think about it this way. Think you would have to have a strength of 20 to get that +5 damage from your strength. So unless someone has a strength of 20, you're going to be just sloughing off any damage that they deal based on their attributes, and you're going to only be dealing solely with the dice roll. So that's pretty big that you're only looking at the dice roll. At -6, this is the point where no character, regardless of the strength bonus, can hope to hurt you with any unarmed strike. So anyone with an unarmed strike, they have to be over level 24 in strength if they're going to hurt you. At -8, any 1d8 weapon will not hurt you. At -12, you are now safe from D12 weapons. So that longsword, if they're at level 10, that -12 you're protected against. And then if you went to -17, you are now protected from the highest single die damage a character could possibly inflict upon you. And it goes on and on. I'm not actually sure if there are any armor or anything that's going to get you that high of damage resistance, but that is how damage resistance works. I'll also go ahead and leave a link in the description to a website that's got a list of all the items. You can also find the armor and all that stuff so that you can see how damage resistance works. Now, say for example, in that same example, we see the technician is hitting us. Why is that? And he's hitting us, if you notice, he hits us, I think, a couple times with like a 4 or a 2, something below 5. Why is that? Because Brejik's armband and belt only protect us from slashing damage and from bludgeoning damage. Now, what is very courteous of Knights of the Old Republic and BioWare is they don't really tell us what kind of weapon deals what kind of damage. You have to do a little bit of research online, you have to do some research in the game code to see what kind of weapons deal what kind of damage, because they just say physical. Well, there are 3 types of physical damage: bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing. And the way that these work, think about it this way. Anything that says blade, whether it be an Knights of the Old Republic 1 or 2, so a vibro blade, not sword, vibro blade, a Reich spinning blade, a Twi'lek spinning blade, the list goes on and on and on. Anything that says vibro blade is going to deal piercing damage. Now, if you notice, the technician is using a vibro blade. He's dealing piercing damage. That is why my belt and my armband are not resisting him. However, the Volker stun sticks, those are dealing bludgeoning damage. So anything like a Volker stun stick, a Gan stun stick, a Bothan stun stick, I think from Knights of the Old Republic 2, all those are going to deal bludgeoning damage. Those are more, I don't know them off the top of my head. I'll leave a link in the description to a website that does tell you the different types of physical damage weapons deal. Those are going to be resisted by bludgeoning. Slashing swords. So any of your swords are going to deal slashing damage. Fair enough. So your damage resistance is going to tell you have a 5 resistance to slashing and to bludgeoning. So that means those types of attacks cannot bypass you unless they go over 5, in which case it'll just be a subtraction of the 2. The last thing I want to talk about, and I'm going to go over just briefly, is damage immunity. So that's exactly what it sounds like. It is the immunity to certain types of damage like sonic, fire, electric, cold, etc. There's some types of armor that give you these immunities, like for example the environmental bastion armor. It gives you 100% resistance to sonic, fire, and cold. And that's great. That's also really expensive. It's probably, I agree with the strategy wiki on this. I think it's a little overkill. That's a really expensive suit of armor. I think, what does it say? It costs 22,000 credits. That's insanity. Take into account, something else like Mandalorian assault armor gives you 9 armor bonus, and it gives you 25 resistance to sonic and fire. Cold and fire. Still, that's probably going to be good enough for you. So, I mean, you're going to be just ignoring quite a bit of damage with, like, say, a 25 damage resistance, 20 damage, 10. You're going to be ignoring quite a bit. So I'll let you decide what you think is best. If you really want that protection and you think that that 100% is important, go for it. The electric might be nice just because then you can ignore Force Storm, especially Knights of the Old Republic 2. It's your decision. Think about it in terms of what you get versus, how much damage are you willing to take? Are you willing to take just a little bit of damage, use the damage resistance for damage reduction, but get, maybe an attribute bonus, get some immunity, stuff like that? I'll leave that ball in your court. Think about that one, what you get in one way or the other. But yeah, that's how damage immunity works. All right, so that's going to wrap it up for this video. Hopefully you found this helpful. Hopefully, if you didn't really understand or didn't know about how the damage mechanics work, hopefully this shed some light on it, helped you out. Please let me know down in the comments if you still have any questions, if I didn't explain anything perfectly and you want to know a little bit more. I'd be happy to explain, just a little bit more. But like if you enjoyed the video, comment down below any thoughts, concerns. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a thing. And I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Have a great one.